I remember around April of 2008, shortly after the initial images of Sonic Unleashed were made public, video game fans on NeoGAF forums began to speculate that the game would stink, strictly based on the quality of its predecessors. Specifically, on the quality of Sonic 06. The game would be judged based on the mood of the fandom rather than the quality of the actual game before its first trailer was even dropped. This was based on a conundrum known as the X cycle, a viral concept that details a gamer's mood swings brought up on by the anticipation of a new game or console. The cycle was used to satirize fandoms and video games as a whole, and obviously the most famous series to adopt this conundrum was the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, which has embodied the cycle to the point that now the phrase Sonic Cycle has become significantly more popular than the conundrum it was based on. The Sonic Cycle is not something super in-depth. It states that when the first info of a new Sonic game is shown, fans will immediately begin to raise their hopes and claim it's the start of Sonic's triumphant return because the screens don't show any of Sonic's friends in them. Because back then, Sonic having friends was considered a bad thing. The next bit of information released on the Sonic game would show pictures of Sonic's old friends, pictures of some of his new friends, resulting in the fans' hopes hitting the ground. And then, when the game would be released, it would be slammed by reviewers, receiving massive disappointment, and the fandom will claim they will never be fooled again. And it's funny because although this is satire, as recently as the release of Sonic Frontiers, if you were following along, you could probably see the cycle play out in front of your eyes. But in the late 2000s, Sonic Unleashed, Sonic and the Black Knight, and Sonic Freeriders fell victim to the Sonic cycle, possibly harder than any other time before it, or even after it, mainly because of the online discourse at the time, and the fact that those games were released in quick succession. The Sonic cycle was broken by Sonic Colors, and further faded with the release of Generations, but the trolls of the internet still needed to satirize the vulnerable Sonic fandom. They developed a new cycle, creatively known as the New Sonic Cycle, which was a positive take on the Sonic cycle. As you can imagine, it was very tongue-in-cheek. Now with the first new info of the game, the Sonic fans point out that something looks questionable, and there's possibly the existence of new friends, which causes the fans to complain and become paranoid about the game ruining Sonic even more. When new information is released, the fans begin to regain hope because of speed platforming gameplay. Only Sonic and a fan favorite friend might be playable, and haters will continue to find the dumbest things to complain about, like the size of Sonic's quills or the buckles on his shoes. And then when the game is released, the fans feel at ease and enjoy the game. The game takes what the fans like from the last title and improves upon it. The extras in the game are not bad, and the haters will look for any reason to complain, like a lack of a Chow Garden. And again, it's kinda funny that I saw both the negative old and positive new Sonic cycles portrayed in full force with the release of Sonic Frontiers. Come to think of it, I guess that game really was genuinely love it or hate it at the time of its launch. The point is that although there's a lot of truth to this meme of the Sonic fandom, I think it's actually a lot more common throughout the video game industry, and even through the movie industry. But by nature of the timing of the failure that was Sonic 2006, in addition to the fact that Sonic was a top 2 or 3 juggernaut of gaming at one point, Sonic got struck with this meme harder than any other franchise could ever imagine. And it's not like Sega and Sonic Team have done themselves any favors. In the games following 06, you had motion controls, werehogs, Saturday morning cartoon storylines, Mario ripoffs, cut corners, rush deadlines, and tons of bad decisions all around. And many of those criticisms can be placed on the games prior to Sonic 06 as well. It seemed like Sonic Team couldn't do anything right. Actually, no. That's exactly what it was. Sonic Team could not do anything right. I'm not saying they were incapable of it. I'm saying that even if they released a perfect Sonic game, there is no way it would have been acknowledged as that because that wouldn't fit the meme and it wouldn't get the clicks. Now you could argue that Sega should have stuck to their guns and chosen to stick with whatever playstyle you happen to think is best. Maybe they never should have abandoned the adventure style after 06, for example. Or maybe everything following Sonic Generations should have just been more of the same. They'd have lost a lot of fans, sure, but they'd have a loyal following. It's hard to know where the fandom would be today. Instead, Sega tried, and mostly failed many times to appeal to what they think the fandom wants, and as a result created such an inconsistent and disjointed fandom that the only thing that holds many of these Sonic fans in a single group is that they all think Sonic should be blue, and even then, they can't agree on which shade of blue. Sonic Team's lack of consistency has basically caused almost every Sonic fan they captured to eventually decide to turn their back on the series because they feel the series has turned their back on them. All of those games have failed, Except, well, they didn't. I mean objectively. If you look at the sales numbers, they didn't fail. People were buying those games, and more importantly, kids were playing those games. And there's one cycle that's stronger and more impactful than the Sonic cycle, and that is the nostalgia cycle. The nostalgia cycle is the strongest cycle that exists, and it's applicable to video games and movies as well. Basically, the cycle goes that a game is released in your childhood. It might be the first game in a series, a sequel, or a reboot. You play it as a kid, let's say around the age of 5, and you love it. It's a great game. You spend endless hours on this game finding new ways to beat it and just exploring every aspect of it. You're not aware of the reviews or online discourse of this game because you're a kid and you're happy. And you might have an older brother that doesn't like the game and you're not really sure why. Around 5 to 8 years later, you play the newest game in that series while you're in middle school. Something feels off about it. It could be the change in a gameplay style or an alteration of the model. You still somewhat enjoy the game, but you're also too busy playing some other games with your friends that are either more popular or more for the cool kids. You'll probably finish the game once and call it a day and not put that many hours into it. You hear your older brother or friend claim that the game that you're playing stinks and ruined the series, and you might actually agree with them. You'll see YouTubers that are about a decade older than you that are just hating on the game because of how it ruined the series. And again, you'll think it's an overreaction, but you might agree just a little bit. And then a few years later when you're in high school, you'll see the newest game in the series come out and a friend or family member might have bought you the game. Or they might own the game and you'll get to try it out for a bit. You'll play it for 2 or 3 hours maximum. You'll be disgusted. It's not the game you grew up with. You don't understand how anyone could even enjoy it. And you'll question why this game is being targeted at kids when it should be targeted at you, the real fan. And you're officially done with the series. You'll become a flag bearer for the game that came out when you were 5 and start talking about how it's the best game in the series. And the developers lost their touch with everything that followed. You'll no longer respect the games that came out when you were in middle school because those games were the start of the downfall. Everyone around you, whether it's in your Discord chat, a subreddit, or your recommended YouTube videos, will have the same beliefs that the game that came out when you were 5 is the high point of the series. Your older brother and his friends think you're crazy. That game was terrible, and the one that came out before it was the best because it was before games became 3D, or widescreen, or any reason, really. But you no longer care what your brother and that whole generation thinks because you're around the age of 20 now and only what you say matters. This lasts for anywhere between 5 to 10 years until one day some kid uploads a video about how all of those games you've been crapping on for the past decade were actually the peak of the series and everything before and after it was terrible. And seemingly the entire fandom agrees. And you realize that everyone around you has moved on from the passion you had towards the series except for you. You no longer have anyone to back you up on your opinions. So you just accept that those young kids will never understand gaming, and you'll enjoy going back to the game you have nostalgia for because it reminds you of your childhood. I cannot begin to explain to you how many video game series this applies to. Halo 4 was crap until it wasn't, until it was again. Mario Sunshine was crap until it wasn't, until it was again, until it wasn't again. Heck, even in the movie industry, the Star Wars prequels were never good until people decided they were. And give it a few more years and people are going to love the sequels if they don't already. Every single game in the Sonic series has obsessively dealt with the nostalgia cycle. And I'm just going to flat out say it. If it was not for the nostalgia cycle, Sonic would have died out by now. It's the nostalgia that keeps the series alive and convinces parents to buy the games for their kids just because of the familiar face of the hedgehog. You likely know where I'm going with this. I'm well into this retrospective and I haven't even started talking about Sonic Unleashed. But Sonic Unleashed became significantly more popular well after it was released. And I'm not only talking about the nighttime stages. People criticized the boost formula because of the way it moved away from the adventure-style gameplay. I remember hearing people call the boost formula Sonic games a glorified version of Temple Run. After a few years, you'd hear more praise, strictly for the daytime stages. And people still criticize more aspects of them needing more polish, as well as hating on the story and the new character, until eventually the game started to get full-on praise, and I've seen it argued on more than one occasion that it's the best Sonic game as a whole. It has a good story, it has the best daytime stages, an acceptable gameplay of nighttime stages, and it's the peak of Sonic. And it's still mind-boggling to me to see how that unraveled over time. The game was despised. People still make fun of the phrase, Werehog, and make such a big deal about it, the same way they did when Robotnik adopted the moniker of Eggman, and I don't really understand why. Werehog is a totally acceptable title. Yeah, you could get technical and say it's called a werewolf and not a wereman, but if we all just called him Sonic the Werewolf, that would have been infinitely weirder. You can hate the fact that he turns into a werehog, but the name Werehog is completely fitting in my opinion. Regardless, however, nowadays the game is loved. The nostalgia cycle is a hell of a thing. And with that out of the way, let's transition straight into the story. The game starts off with possibly the best visualization of a Sonic vs. Eggman fight in the series. And that's not only my opinion, it's pretty unanimous across the board amongst lovers and haters. The production value on this introduction is incredible. I may have enjoyed the introduction to Sonic and the Black Knight, but this is a whole other level. And it's made even better because it literally looks like it could be taken out of a proper CGI Sonic movie. In a battle against an Eggman fleet in outer space, Sonic decides to go supersonic to end Eggman once and for all. Eggman is forced to retreat and grovel and beg for mercy. But naturally, it turns into a trick and he manages to get a hold of Sonic. Eggman then sucks the emeralds and their power out of Sonic's super form and uses that power to jumpstart his laser cannon and take a shot directly at the Earth. This not only causes the Earth to begin to come apart, but it seems to awaken a massive monster within the Earth known as Dark Gaia. Dark Gaia causes some kind of negative reaction to the emeralds, and Sonic turning him into what is hastily known as the Werehog, as well as turning the emeralds gray and powerless. Eggman then gloats about how he'll use Dark Gaia's power to create Eggman Land, and proceeds to drop Sonic and the emeralds down to the Earth. Dark Gaia also seems to sort of dissolve and start to spread around the Earth, and I just want to reiterate how the introduction sequence is some of the highest production quality I've seen in the series so far. As Sonic is falling to the Earth, he suddenly finds himself waking up in a green force field in the sky. The bubble then disappears and he continues falling towards the Earth and notices a little rodent. It's unconscious. He wakes it up, scares the crap out of it, and begins to have a conversation with the critter. It mentions to Sonic that he looks like a monster, and he realizes he's not the hedgehog he thought he was anymore. But the critter can't remember who he is. He just remembers falling from the sky and sort of has a mini panic attack. This prompts Sonic to worry that he might have landed on him, so he offers to have the little guy get his memory back. They excitedly begin to embark on their adventure, but not before the sun starts to rise and Sonic turns back into his actual hedgehog form. I love these over-the-top Sonic stories, for the record. Games like Sonic and the Black Knight get a praise from me, and that's primarily because in games like Lost World, Generations before Shadow Generations, and Colors, I was so starved for a story in a Sonic game that it made me appreciate a game that took place in the world of King Arthur. So right off the bat, seeing the great introductory cutscene, the extremely over-the-top splitting of the Earth, and the birth of Dark Gaia, and even Sonic's crazy transformation and fun little back and forth with the tiny critter, I could already tell that I was going to enjoy the story of this game, at least to some extent. Sonic and the critter find themselves in Apatos, which seems to be a city based off Santorini in Greece. They're trying to figure out what the deal is with the emeralds being black and Sonic transforming. The critter then gets distracted by an ice cream salesman who is super happy to be selling ice cream. After they buy the ice cream, Sonic decides to call the critter Chip because of how much he loves chocolate chip ice cream, and they start to ask around to see if anybody knows him, but there was no luck. Eventually the sun sets and Sonic transforms back into a werehog, realizing that this is going to be his form at night, while during the day he'll be a hedgehog. He also notices that the ice cream salesman is no longer joyous, and seemingly all of the villagers in the area are miserable now. They finally make a comment about the fact that the Earth is split apart, whereas during the day, nobody seems to care about it. The duo then runs into Tails, who was surrounded by a gang of these dark monsters. Sonic comes in full werehog style and obliterates them. And then he proceeds to update Tails on everything that's occurred up until that point. Tails recommends they head over to Professor Pickle at the University of Spagonia, a city that's inspired by Siena in Italy, which is apparently in another continent and requires that they fly there. Upon the arrival, they find out Professor Pickle has been kidnapped by Eggman. Sonic and Tails are adamant that they need to save the professor. But what I appreciated most is that Chip was super hurt by the news that he was kidnapped too. The trio then travels to Mazari, a city based off of Africa, and seems to take inspiration from various cities throughout. They then find the professor being overly critical about the food provided to him, and as they free him, he makes it clear that they need to take a scroll known as the Gaia manuscripts with them from the nearby safe, which is made easy work of by Sonic. When they return to Spagonia University, Professor Pickle explains that the Gaia manuscripts reveal that the returning of the power back to the Emeralds via the Gaia temples around the Earth will help them return the planet to normal, giving Sonic a clear goal. So again, I need to reiterate that I am all for this story and the game setup. The cutscene sets the tone, sets out a clear objective, gives a good background of the lore and why everything is happening. And I mean, okay, Sonic awakening a hidden being that has something to do with emeralds isn't exactly a new concept. And the fact that Knuckles isn't involved in a story involving the emeralds on its own is a little bit bizarre. But what can I say? I ate the stuff right up. Sonic starts on his journey to locate the temples, which first takes him to Mazery, where he bumps into Eggman bullying a bunch of villagers. Sonic obviously saves the day along with Chip at his side. Eggman makes a run for it, but Sonic catches up and beats his Egg Beetle. And then they find the first Gaia Temple, where they place their emerald in, and the magic of the emeralds brings down and reconnects the portion of the Earth that they're standing on, with Tails conveniently nearby to let them know they're progressing on his little tablet. Next, you get another typical Amy scene where she mistakes someone for Sonic, but this time it's actually Sonic, so maybe we should give her some credit. It's kinda sad though, because Sonic legitimately feels hurt by the fact that Amy doesn't recognize him. I don't really remember a time where I saw Sonic feeling so vulnerable about something, and I actually kind of like it. Obviously, this seems to be in part due to the fact that he's in his werehog form, so there's more negativity flowing through him, but I like that he genuinely feels hurt because his biggest fan can't even recognize him, and it gives his character a little bit of depth. Regardless, they make their way around Spagonia, they find a group of people with something clearly wrong with them dancing, and one person seemingly is dancing with Amy against her consent. With the power of Chip's camera, they were able to remove the dark creatures that possess the group of individuals and allow Sonic to take care of them. When Sonic helps Amy up, she takes a peek at him, and he legitimately has to run away because he can't stand the thought of her seeing him for the monster that he currently is. Which again, is kinda sad and sweet at the same time. I really enjoyed these Amy moments in the story, and I'm glad they don't really overdo it after this scene. Professor Pickle tells Amy about everything that happened and explains to her that the monster she's seeing is indeed Sonic. The whole cheesy stuff doesn't overstay its welcome or take control of the story, which I think is for the best, but I did enjoy it as a short blip in the story. The story then continues to the next Gaia Temple, which takes place in Chunnan, which is based off the Hunan region in China. The same cycle continues. Sonic defeats a boss and finds a temple and reconnects another part of the Earth. Also, Chip offers this bird a giant piece of chocolate. Meanwhile, Eggman has a giant sub while learning that Eggman Land's construction is delayed because Dark Gaia isn't really put together yet. And it's all because Eggman woke it up too soon and it wasn't fully rested, which is humorously pointed out to be an oversight by Eggman and a repercussion of his hasty actions. All the while also being told that the planet is coming back together because Eggman discarded the Chaos Emeralds along with Sonic, which is yet another repercussion of his hasty actions. So yeah, overconfidence is always Eggman's biggest enemy, and he literally doubles down on that. I love how much of a narcissist Eggman is. To be fair, he's also very smart, so he deploys a defense around the remaining temples in anticipation of Sonic continuing his journey to restore the Earth. But he also continues to be hasty and deploys a machine to attract all of the Dark Gaia energy to a single location to help speed up the development of Dark Gaia. But it's all for nothing, as Sonic continues to make it through the temples and restores the Emeralds, which restores the Earth. This includes stops along Shamar, a Middle Eastern village taking inspiration from areas of Iraq, Jordan, Qatar, and Iran, and Holaska, which is inspired by the Inuit villages of the Arctic. Meanwhile, Eggman's plans to bring all of the dark energy together seems to be moving along, and honestly, I'm really starting to get a kick out of his minion's sarcasm. I genuinely enjoy whenever him and Eggman have a back and forth. He's known as SA-55, and would eventually become Orbot in Sonic colors. Or I guess he's like the prototype for Orbot, maybe. I'm not exactly sure of the details on that one. But I enjoy SA-55 significantly more than I've ever enjoyed Orbot and Cubot for that matter. I think his clear distaste for Eggman plus his monotone voice and sarcasm are a treat. As the story progresses, more temples are visited and emeralds are placed and the Earth reconnects. And the remaining locations that Sonic visits include Empire City, which is based off of the Big Apple, and Atabat, which is based on Southeast Asian locations such as Indonesia, Thailand, and Cambodia. I actually really enjoyed the locales they picked and their depiction of them. It seems pretty bare bones at first, but as you dig a bit deeper, you realize it's more than just a generic selection of a specific location. If you Google some of the cities these areas are based on, you can see there's a bit more detail than meets the eye. I won't delve too deep into it because this video is already long enough as it is, but at first I felt like it was a typical Eurocentric selection and view of the varying locations. But when I started to dig a bit deeper and searching the specific city the areas were based off, I actually gained a lot more respect for the game designers, especially considering this game released in like 2008 when you could probably get away with being generic and getting details incorrect in areas perceived as third world by the Western audience. Anyway, as Sonic and Chip began to move towards the penultimate temple, Chip's nerves start to show, and for some reason, neither him nor Sonic are sure why. Sonic gives them the old arm around the shoulder buddy talk to settle the nerves, and it's not until after the emerald is placed that we find out who this little fella was all along. He is indeed Light Gaia, which I guess makes sense because the opposite of a big scary monster is a cute little not Pokemon. It's a fun little twist. I think it was unexpected at the time of this game's release. I say think because I played this game well after it was released, and that whole thing was already spoiled for me because I didn't really care that much, and I had seen enough retrospectives to already know what was going to happen. But from my understanding, the general consensus was that it was unexpected. Actually, the general consensus was that this game and the story sucks, but you know what I mean. But regardless, for me, despite knowing who he was, seeing the journey there was very enjoyable. I felt a fondness for Chip. One that I haven't truly felt for a new Sonic character in a very long time, possibly since playing Sonic Adventure 2 and appreciating Shadow and Rouge as characters. And when Sonic tells him that he thinks it's because of Chip's presence that he was in control of his Werehog form and didn't turn into a monster, Chip tells him that's not at all the case. It's because Sonic is too strong to lose himself and is pure. And the first time you see this whole cutscene, genuinely, it makes you feel a bit sad that the journey is coming to an end. It's just such a nice feel-good moment for me and a great setup for the grand finale, which is a hell of a finale. Eggman Land finally exists. Sonic and Chip make it there. I'm not entirely sure if this is the same Eggman Land as the one in Sonic Colors, but I definitely got similar vibes to Sonic and Tails arriving there in that game. But it feels much darker in Unleashed. Almost how a theme park made by Joker and a Batman cartoon would feel, and I'm all here for that darker tone. After Sonic and Chip make their way through Eggman Land, which by the way takes almost 50 minutes to get through, they place the final emerald and officially begin to bring the world back together. As Sonic and Chip begin to have a heartfelt celebration and Tails and Pickle celebrate via FaceTime, Eggman makes an appearance with his Egg Dragoon, causing Sonic and Chip to battle him while they fall towards the Earth's core. And as they battle out and fall deeper and deeper towards the Earth's core, Sonic finally deals the finishing blow and destroys the Egg Dragoon. And just as Eggman begins to wallow in his loss, Dark Gaia conveniently awakens in full force and immediately goes after Sonic and Chip. But not before Team Rocketing Eggman into oblivion. Dark Gaia's energy begins to completely suck the Werehog out of Sonic. And while this is all happening, I appreciate Chip wearing his heart on his sleeve all throughout. He goes from ready to fight, to being terrified, to providing a full-on shield to help Sonic survive instead of running away. And then he does something equally bizarre as it is awesome. And let me just say, if you're the kind of person who enjoys movies like Pacific Rim, if you like anime, if you're able to suspend your belief in realism, and most importantly, if you're a 10-year-old, this scene was awesome. Chip draws in the 7 temples and transforms into a pseudo-mech that would make Zordon proud. Now Sonic and Chip have to battle out against Dark Gaia. Together, Chip attempts to pin down Dark Gaia while Sonic has to make multiple attempts to slam into his eyes. The final blow is eventually dealt and it seems like all hope is restored to the world until Dark Gaia says nope and opens the rest of its eyes. And let me tell you, this thing has got a lot of eyes. And it seems to have achieved full transformation, which causes it to spread all of its fear and darkness around the entire world, showing just how terrified everyone on Earth is. All those townspeople around the world that we saved and interacted with have basically given up hope. But Sonic's #1 fan, Amy, is there to give you hope that if there's anybody that's faced this kind of turmoil before, anyone that's faced all types of monsters, anyone that's been backed into a corner and has taken punches and hate from forums, reviewers, and all different types of neckbeards, it's Sonic the freaking Hedgehog. You lend your negativity to Perfect Dark Gaia. I will always be positively supportive when Super Sonic is around, and we'll see who comes out on top of all the dark energy that's been bestowed upon the fandom. And along with Chip, we'll destroy every naysayer to this franchise that has existed, and together, we will deal the final blow.
We've all gotta start from
Sorry about that. I got a little carried away. Anyway, Dark Guy is defeated, Sonic passes out, Chip carries him back to the surface to safety. The townspeople all rejoice in relief, the Earth is back together. The background music just tugs at your heartstrings. SA-55 gives you another smirk as he mocks Eggman, and it's just all around a happy ending, even if Professor Pickle gets a bit too philosophical for the moment. And just then, just as I thought the ending was perfect, it got even better. The whole ending sequence does so well. And look, I know I am oogling about the story, but the reality is, this might be the story that I was looking for in a Sonic game ever since I was in middle school. This has nothing to do about whether the game is good or bad. Strictly talking about the story. This is the type of story, the type of Sonic game as a result, that I wish that I had played when it released. It's the type of story that I think is fitting for the adventure era. And the story alone makes me love this game. I remember when I played Sonic and the Black Knight for the first time, I thought it was not very good, but I couldn't help but love it because of the story and the characterization. And Sonic and the Black Knight pales in comparison to the story of Sonic Unleashed, even Sonic Frontiers. Looking back at it now, I can't believe I enjoyed the story of that game that much just because of how much more I enjoy Sonic Unleashed story. Unleashed easily has one of the best Sonic stories in the entire franchise. It gives me Sonic Adventure 2 vibes, but with better production quality. Shadow the Hedgehog might have been an amazing anti-hero. He's probably my favorite Sonic character, but Chip's quick entrance and exit into the franchise is a shame. He, just like Sonic Unleashed story, deserved much more respect than they received. And look, I'm not going to say he was a better character than Tails, but I will say that I don't think any Sonic video game has ever done as good of a job with Sonic and Tails dynamic as Unleashed did with Sonic and Chip. Excellent story, excellent introduction, and excellent finale. 10 out of 10. I'm not exaggerating. Now let's look at the actual gameplay. Now, I went back and forth a bit about how I wanted to approach the actual mechanics. Once again, referencing Sonic and the Black Knight, I knew for sure I was going to love the story and dislike the controls. So for a video of Sonic and the Black Knight, I would discuss the story last to end it at the high note. In the case of this game, there's a lot more nuance to the gameplay mechanics. And I didn't want to get into all of that before discussing the story because I wanted to drool about the story at my own leisure before I started getting into the nitty-gritty of this game. As far as I'm concerned, there are a few things worth discussing when it comes to the actual game. And some things that are worth glossing over because I don't think discussing it will provide too much. For starters, the production value is amazing. I understand I'm playing a more advanced version of this title, so it's likely a much better experience than those that played it on original hardware. But the graphics, the visuals, performance, music, and honestly even the voice acting is really good. Actually, the voice acting is probably the weakest part of it all, but even then, I don't think it was terrible enough to hinder the experience. And likewise, the whole situation with the battle music theme that kept coming up during the Werehog stages, yeah, it might be a bit annoying, but I swear it's blown out of proportion in a way that only Sonic fans could blow something out of proportion. The game looks good, it sounds good, and plays good, and that's all I really want to say about that. Additionally, you have the daytime stages, which are played by regular old modern Sonic. Once again, I can't really offer too different of a perspective than many others have given. I've heard these stages garner so much praise that going into this game, I genuinely thought that I would think they were overrated. But I was blown away with just how good they were. And honestly, it's at this point where I'm starting to understand the perspective of many of the younger Sonic fans that they have towards the later game in the series, and why they hated everything from the meta era and onwards. Sonic Frontiers cyberspace levels, I thought they were acceptable, but playing this now I realize that they're a lot weaker. Frontiers' strength is in the open world, Sonic Force's boost levels looked good and they played well enough, but there were so many repeated stage themes throughout the game that it did get a bit redundant. Sonic Colors, I really didn't like that game. And as for Sonic Generations, well, it's an amazing game. Probably a top 3 3D Sonic game for me. But if I'm being completely honest, despite the fact that I think Sonic Generations has damn near flawless control and amazing levels, Sonic Unleashed's daytime stages were far more enjoyable for me. I think there's a certain charming hint of creativity with Unleashed that I didn't quite find during Generations. And I think the fact that the level themes were original and not taken from old games lends to that. The fact that Unleashed was made in an era of Sonic prior to when they decided to start to play things safe also lends to that. And I think I'm just gonna say this out loud. 3D Sonic's boost formula might have peaked with Sonic Unleashed. I don't know what it is, but I gelled more with Sonic's control in Unleashed than I did with Generations. He felt a bit heavier, a little bit more stiff, and that worked for me. Even the drifting. I've seen so many people hate on the way Sonic drifts in this game, and it felt very easy, if not easier than it did when I was playing Generations. I don't know, maybe Sonic's feel in Unleashed is consistent with my preferred vehicle stats in Mario Kart, but I was genuinely surprised with how good it felt to control Sonic in the daytime stages. And it was more than just the running and jumping and drifting. I felt the QTEs and the rail grinding sections lent themselves well with the gameplay. They were a good change of pace and fun little minigame challenge to endure instead of just watching high-speed spectacles. Years of Mario Party minigames probably made them a lot easier for me than it did for others. I guess Mario Kart and Mario Party made me love the daytime stages more than I thought I would. I wonder if Smash Brothers will help me with the nighttime stages. Anyway, I bring up the QTEs because that's usually seen as a very big negative, but I think it offers a good challenge to the game and is implemented better than other Sonic games. And yes, I'm even including those airplane stages everyone seems to huff and puff about. Like, are they really that terrible? There's 2 of them and they're not even that long. At the very least, the QTE nature of them is more in line with the reflexes required in a Sonic game than it would to be just flying around and shooting everything. And I get that many people would just prefer if they weren't even in there to begin with, but I stress, how hard were they and how long did they last that you'll go out of your way to wage a war against them? I don't know who I'm talking to at this point, but if you're offended by it, it's probably you, Mr. Sonic fan of the mid-2000s. Now, the stages all have multiple routes, and I would notice them as I ran through the levels. Many of them are hidden in plain sight, and others I can't imagine without having to look up a guide. But there are enough obvious ones that it just begs you to try these stages multiple times. And if you have to look up an optimal route for a few stages, I think that's totally fine. It's not really like it's the first game in history someone has to look up a hint for. The game also has tons of cheap hits, momentum stoppers, and flat out death traps that you'll have to learn to navigate around. And I'm not sure if I'm actually in the minority on this, but that's part of the essence of Sonic. You have to take some punches to get to the goal, and you'll eventually learn to maneuver. And on a casual playthrough, none of these momentum killers are that terrible anyway. It's only when you're trying to S-rank a stage does it really begin to frustrate you. But the stages do a great job teasing you into wanting to replay them and get that perfect run that gives every Sonic fan since the 90s that amazing rush that they die for. And of course, the beauty of it all is that the S rank is totally optional. It's not needed to finish the story, it's not needed to gain a reward because there is no reward for S ranking the entire game. It's all in all a meaningless challenge to complete. Look, I'm a millennial, which means I no longer have time to play these games in full and attempt to S rank anything. But if you're going to try and S rank a game, that means you're attempting to be perfect at said game. And I guess I might be sounding like a boomer now, but perfect doesn't come easy. If you can't S-rank something, then don't put yourself through it. Now that being said, S-ranking is totally unreasonable in this game, and it's hard as heck. So mad respect to anybody that's able to S-rank it. I think that covers everything I need to say about the daytime levels. Easily my favorite boost gameplay and levels in the entire series. Next, I think it's time we talk about the hub worlds. So in general, I haven't liked a hub world that much since I played Mario 64. And I'm pretty sure that the only reason I love the hub world in Mario 64 as much as I did is because I was a kid when I played it. So believe me when I say that I am genuinely shocked that the hub worlds in Sonic Unleashed didn't bother me at all. If anything, I appreciated them existing in the game. I genuinely liked seeing all of the different people and locations because I enjoyed seeing how well they represented the locations they were based on, and going through and speaking to them was enjoyable. There's a bit of depth with the NPCs when it comes to their side stories and little micro missions that they provide, and it's not required, but it's a nice distraction. And most importantly, I never felt lost. It's pretty straightforward. You're almost always pointed in the right direction. Every now and then there's a puzzle that's worth solving, or an upgrade to Sonic's moveset you need to achieve and backtrack to unlock a new area. It's pretty easy to speed up the travel too. A quick pause button and you can go back to any of the locations with ease. Dare I say, it almost made the game feel adventure-esque, given that the boost stages took control of all that usual speed set piece that you'd want in a Sonic game. I felt the hub world provided a lot of what I felt was missing from a 3D Sonic title. It gave me puzzles to solve, NPCs to talk to and find more information from, reporting to Professor Pickle as needed for guidance on where to go, backtracking to unlock new areas with new powers. All of this stuff has existed in Sonic games. It's not new, but it was separated away from the actual stages. I liked it all. It made for a nice cohesive world that I was able to traverse around and locales to return to after I thought I was done with them. I'm glad the stages weren't just laid out in order, because after I left Spagonia or Chunnan, I found myself needing to come back to them for newer missions or information that I enjoyed going back and revisiting these locations for. Genuinely, I'm surprised at how much I'm praising the hub world. I usually hate them in almost every other game I play, but I have virtually no complaints here. Add on to that, and this might come as a surprise to you all, but I love me a collectathon. So even if the game didn't require you to get as many Sun and Moon medals as it does, I'd still have collected a ton of them. Heck, even in 2D platformers, I enjoy going after whatever MacGuffins are there, just because it allows me to search every nook and cranny of the stage. So it's entirely possible, and probably the actual reason that I enjoy the hub worlds. They had Sun and Moon medals hidden all over them, and they were genuinely fun to look for. Some of them were fun and in your face, and others required a bit more snooping around and even a bit of using your brain. It was actually very well balanced and made even better that, yet again, you're not required to have all of the Sun and Moon medals to beat the game. Nor does getting all of them really reward you with anything. So if you're dead bent on collecting every one of them, then I can respect that. But I really dislike when people use the amount of collectibles in this game as a negative point against it. And I understand that there may be a point in time where if you're not vigilant, you'll have to go back and redo stages or revisit some hub worlds. So maybe the first time you played this game, if you didn't collect the medals because the game didn't tell you and you had to go back and redo a bunch of the game, then I might understand your frustration. But to be fair, if you're neglecting the medals, you should be able to find out pretty early on that you don't have enough medals to progress. And by that point, you'll only have a few levels to replay to get up to speed. There were only 2 moments that I had to go backtrack, and it was literally to unlock the final moon stage that required 80 moon medals, which I was like 11 shy of, as well as the Sun stage that required 120 Sun medals and I was 19 shy of those. And in both cases, it's because I started to get a bit lazy with collecting, so I kinda had it coming. But it did allow me the fun task of figuring out what I should play to reach those medals. I basically didn't go out of my way to collect any medals in the daytime stages, so when I reached that stopping point, I started to find some new and non-required daytime stages, and I got to enjoy those as well. I think the game could have maybe done a better job telling newcomers that they needed the medals. Maybe that way they'd have tried harder to find them from the get-go. But again, if you weren't collecting them, you'd have found out pretty quickly that you needed them. I personally would use the nighttime stages to look for the medals. I actually never had to replay a single nighttime stage because I already did my due diligence and found plenty of the medals in those levels, even if I didn't find them all. So I knew it wasn't worth going back to them because I was thorough enough where I didn't need to go and dig deeper, and instead I could focus more on redoing a daytime stage to find a medal there or searching in the hub world. And quite frankly, the only reason I searched in the nighttime levels is because it felt naturally like I should. I collected a bunch of other stuff too, books and records, and I don't even know what those unlocked. There were some weird potions too, I guess. It just happened naturally because I like to collect things, and this game gives you things to collect. Okay, I guess it's finally time. I am so far into this video, and I can't really put it off much longer. It's time to discuss Sonic the Werehog. Up until now, I have virtually nothing to complain about this game. In fact, I'd say everything else is pretty much perfect. So the Werehog, which is by far the largest portion of this game, is important to delve into. As I alluded to earlier, I don't really hate the existence of the Werehog from a story perspective, or really the fact that it's even called a Werehog. I think Sonic looks pretty cool in this transformation, and I enjoy the reason he exists from a narrative perspective. Additionally, when it comes to collecting Sun and Moon medals, he's a lot easier to control than regular Sonic, so the collectathon aspect was far more enjoyable with him as a werehog. And the levels and set pieces of the nighttime stages were equally as good as the daytime stages, so they were a treat to maneuver around. And while it's not speed-based control, Werehog Sonic was easy to control and was able to run around and platform, and had minor moments that I really felt like it was broken. It's likely not a surprise to anyone at this point, but the inspiration for the nighttime levels was taken from the early God of War games. And I'd like to point something out. My experience with these combat style games is somewhat limited. I played a bunch of early Assassin's Creed games and I love those. I played the Arkham games and I love those too. And back in 2022, in anticipation of God of War Ragnarok, I decided to go through and play all of the God of War games for the very first time. It was a series that I had never touched, and I always wanted to play it. I beat the first game, and I loved it. I beat the second game, and I loved it. I beat the third game. I loved that one too. I beat the 2 titles on the PSP, and I loved them. I didn't play Ascension, not sure why. I should probably do that at some point. And all that was left between me and the release of Ragnarok was God of War 2018, and I didn't last long at all. I didn't like it. I know, I probably sound like I'm crazy. It just did not feel like the same type of game to me. Now, in fairness, I might have burnt myself out playing all of the previous games, or I might have to go into it without the mindset that it's a God of War title. But I know that the reason I wasn't enjoying it was because it wasn't the mindless hack and slash of the old games where you had to reach a target, find a goal, do a bunch of QTEs, look for various hidden items, interact with various aspects of the environment, fight giant baddies and look for critical hits. Those were the things I enjoyed about God of War, and they weren't the case in God of War 2018. So here I sat a few years later playing them as a werehog. And look, it's not as fleshed out as God of War. The bad guys are a bit unimaginative. It's hard to compare to a game that's the pinnacle of its genre. And to reel things back into the Sonic world for a bit, Sonic Frontiers and Sonic Boom are like the only 2 games that actually have any form of combat. Sonic as a werehog is way more fleshed out than the combat in those games. And if you don't feel like learning new moves or shielding or thinking too much about it, you could literally just mash the Y button during every fight and beat this game. But if you do like to look into combos, some of them are pretty fun to pull off. Some of them even give you extra height and maneuverability to break certain sequences in the game, which is always a treat. I actually quite enjoyed the combat. I enjoyed the werehog stages. I liked Sonic the Werehog. The problem is, that's not really what people would consider a Sonic game. However, I don't care what other people consider to be a Sonic game. I've spent this whole video going on about how I enjoyed every aspect of it. Did you really think I was going to spend almost 45 minutes praising a game only to get to the end where it comes time to talk about the portion that literally takes up the majority of the game, just to do a quick rug pull and be like, yeah, psych, the Werehog sucks and this game is crap? Nah, dude, this game had everything. It had the best Sonic speed stages I've ever played. It had the best collectathon I've ever enjoyed in a Sonic game. It had the best puzzles I've ever solved in a Sonic game. It had the best setting. It had the best cinematics. It had the best character dialogue. Hell, it had the best story in a series that I always thought peaked with the stories in Sonic Adventure 2. I loved Eggman Land. It was such a fitting final challenge, and I welcomed it with open arms. And it even had a button masher for a final boss that decades of being the best button masher in Mario Party had prepared me for, and I was so ready for it. Heck, I loved all of the bosses. I love the final boss. Those stupid phases that everybody always complains about, they were a great challenge. I was down to 1 or 2 lives by the time I was able to pass by all of those dang rocks without Dark Gaia killing me, and I was thrilled to defeat him once and for all. This has become, quite frankly, not only my favorite Sonic game that I ever played, but it might actually be up there as my new favorite game of all time. Or at the very least, it would make my Mount Rushmore of gaming. I'm not kidding. I love this game. I am shocked at how much I love this game. Throughout all of my time being a YouTuber, all of my time revisiting all of these Sonic games, I found myself going into titles that I thought I would hate and being surprised by just how good they were. But nothing to this extent. Sonic Unleashed is amazing, and I don't know how else I can highlight to you all just how amazing that this game is. It needs to be praised.